All right, all right. Let's see. What we have here? Run down. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings. Welcome to Live with Hanifa Nayela. I am Hanifa Nayela, and we have a wonderful, wonderful conversation for you today with a very, very uh, excellent, I would say, teacher that I admire and appreciate and hold in high esteem, highly respect so much. So I'm super, super excited to have this conversation. If you are here, make sure that you let me know you're here. I see one person. Hey, Black Stoic. Peace and blessings to you. Thanks for passing through. Hey, Annie. Thanks for passing through. Let me know you're here. Don't be a lurker in the background in the clouds. We are friendly over here. Let me know you're here so that I can talk to you and shout you out. But I am not going to prolong any longer because we are running a little late today. Well, many me. And so I'm just gonna jump right into it. Peace to everyone that's coming in. Let me go ahead and introduce our guest to you guys. Some of you guys know him already. Some of you guys will be introduced to him for the first time tonight. Nonetheless, he is powerful any which way you put it. So I want to introduce you guys to Baba Baruti. Hi, Baba Baruti.
Greetings, Sister Honey. How you doing? It's wonderful being here
Yes.
in the presence of you. You are, and it's like sometimes we want to get into this big ego thing, but we see you as very strong here.
Oh,
So
I appreciate you.
it's an honor. It's an honor to be on.
Thank you, thank you. Baba Ruti, I'm just gonna make sure I shout out my and just so you know, I'll take some pauses just to acknowledge people as they come in as well. Hey Enid, thanks for passing through and showing some love. Hey sis, thanks for coming through and always supporting. Um Oluseyi, he says a BB 40 and race for us African family. Peace to you as well. Hugh is here. Saying peace, family, peace to you as well. Uh Oluseyi again. Yes, say peace to you as well. I have my good sister here, Sister Ma'at, over at Ma'at Speaks, saying peace as well. Guys, I am super, super excited. I think that's everyone in the comment section that I've acknowledged thus far. I will also take some breaks. If you guys have questions for Baba Baruti, make sure you guys put it in the chat as usual. And we see Crypto Vols passing through. Peace to you as well, family. Thanks for the support. So, Baba Baruti, I have you here, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with you because I am sort of new, not new, but I've been in this space for like a year, and there's like has been a lot of conversation around like Black culture, and the question always comes up: what Black culture is. And I noticed that a lot of people, maybe I would say, even in my generation, I would dare say, there's a lot of conversation of no one really being able to pinpoint what Black culture is, right? And so I'm like, but if we can't really pin that down, right? How do we unify? What does that look like? So I'm like, this is a big important piece I feel is missing. And so I thought about it like, do I want to have this conversation with? And you came to mind because I got a ton of your books. And so first of all, I want to say welcome to my broadcast. I know this is your first time here, not
Yes.
your first time speaking with me, but your first time here on this particular platform.
Right.
And I'm just gonna jump right in. Can you talk to me about black culture? What is Black culture? Why is it that our people here in the Americas having difficulty defining what Black culture is or what that means?
Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do before I forget, I'm going to put this up.
Okay.
This is my last book. It's entitled Identity. And
Okay.
culture is at the center of this because I've come across over the last few decades that same issue. It isn't new in
Okay.
terms of the confusion.
Okay.
And the confusion is understandable when you've been taught to hate where you came from and to look at yourself as an extension of
Mhm.
an ideal. And the ideal is Urugu. The ideal is the European, and the closer that you can become to that. So, but for us, the closer that we come to that, then the more confused we get, because the more we move away from who we naturally are, and it creates confusion. So you have you have so many people who are running toward things that are dividing us. European culture is able to dominate so well, or the European nation is able to dominate so well because they keep the people who are underneath them fragmented. And the greater the differences that they can create, or have these people create within themselves, then the greater the lower the probability that they're ever going to be able to unite on anything.
Yes.
And in this society, because of the egos, because of the extreme individualism, then everybody's opinion becomes correct. Yeah. Everybody's opinion is right. And when you do that, that just leads to further fragmentation. So what we have to do, we have to that term Sankofa or Kebuka, that really speaks to the solution. And we hear people talk about it, but it's more than just a movement. It has to be an action within a movement. So if we want to move to the point, and that doesn't include everybody, that means the core group of individuals who understand, because you're not going to get the majority of the people to move in that direction in a society that validates and has for hundreds of years been validated. I'm not just talking about here in the United States. Let's talk about Latin America, wherever we're at. When you have people who have been submerged in subject positions in a system that is their only source of validation in their mind. Okay, so when I remember teaching when I was teaching college, and a student actually asked me, what European scholars said, what I said. That would validate what I said to him. And of course, I smiled because I knew where he was trying to go. But it's still the idea that we're being validated by someone else, and that someone else is not looking for our interest. That someone else wants us divided, because that's the only way that someone else can control us. I think we have to understand culture as an instrument of power.
Okay.
Technically, social science definition, culture is everything man-made, material, non-material, passed on from one generation to the next to ensure the survival of that people.
Yes.
This European culture operates as a defense mechanism for Europeans. That's why within this culture, you can see definitions of African men and increasingly African women being seen as criminals, just those who aren't in prison just haven't been caught yet. That kind of mentality is a defensive mentality, which allows them to stay on top and us on the bottom.
Okay.
And there's so many things I think that need to be grasped. One is just that basic fact. I've talked about Runoko Rashidi's statement a number of times. It was a conversation we had. I'm sure he said it somewhere else, though. We're having a conversation. He said, everywhere that I've been on this planet, and I've been around this planet many times, everywhere I've been on this planet, Black folks are at the bottom. Everywhere, every single solitary place, which helps us to understand ourselves better as a nation. And then when we look at people like, Molefi Asante, the Hares, other folks have made the point that the differences between different African ethnic groups, which is a whole other discussion, but different African ethnic groups, the difference between them is smaller than the difference between Africans and Europeans as a people, as a culture. One other, so many others, but one other important aspect right now, we're a spiritual people.
Yes.
Everywhere I've read about us, everywhere I've looked, we're the most spiritual people on the planet. I hear that from continental African scholars. I hear that from European scholars. I hear that from quote unquote African American scholars. We're the most spiritual people on the planet. If we are, and have always been, not if we are, because we are, we have to look back at our ancestors, understand how they understood the universe, how they interpreted reality, unless we're thinking that they're stupid, and then we should be walking around saying, my ancestors. But our ancestors were extremely spiritual. They didn't have science that wasn't spiritually grounded. Here, you have science that's distanced from it. So our ancestors didn't have that. So in order for us to understand who we are culturally and at base, that we need to understand the importance of spirituality in our lives, not religion, but spirituality in our lives. And one of the critical ways for warriors to understand that, I think one of the best ways for warriors to understand that is to read Mama Remba's Urugu. Because in Urugu, she has coined this concept of Asili.
Asili, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is a phenomenal concept in terms of us understanding the spiritual foundation, the spiritual integument, the spiritual envelope, the spiritual heart and soul of African people, how that came into being, which you didn't really talk about a lot, but that's us. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand the culture that was created out of that. And that culture reflects us. So the road back, that's what makes this so difficult. The road back to that is long, is very, very long. And most of us aren't willing to take that trek. It's so much easier. It's so much safer just to sit and debate and argue and pick up this little piece of what it means to be African and this little convenient piece of what it means to be African and go back part of the way, not all of the way. This is good enough. I'm comfortable here. I have a vested interest. I feel secure here. I don't want to go back too far because this may alienate me from Europeans and European culture. And then I'm going to lose everything that I have, which is what keeps a lot of people from being the kind of warriors that we need. Fear of losing. They have a vested interest in the European ideal. They have a vested interest in European definitions and interpretation of reality. They have a vested interest in the European definition of culture that they've given us, which is the one that I just gave, but it allows for you to name things that are not culture. So culture, and I have to get into the debates with young folks about this. Youth culture is not a culture. It is a subculture, because the culture that's defined within, the culture that operates in is European culture. So this is a subculture within European culture. And when we call it a culture and thinking those terms, I don't have a problem, using the term youth culture or drug culture or whatever, but that's so small. Those are so small and technically insignificant relative to the culture out of which they operate. Because in an African culture, you wouldn't have this type of youth culture. This would not exist, because the connection with the adults and the respect for the elders and all the rest of that would be intact. So it wouldn't be seen as a separate culture. But European culture, because it needs to fragment, atomize people against themselves, operate in a sense of control chaos. Because if you can control that chaos, you can control the resources, you can control the direction of that chaos, and you can continue to profit and rule. So it's, to me, a lot of the definitions are messed up. I think Amos and Wilson probably explained it best, really, in the last book that was published by him, which of course was published posthumously, but the Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat.
Self-defeat, yeah.
He talks a lot about the need for us to control the definitions, to take our definitions out of the hands of Europeans and do that for ourselves. Something that I call reconceptualization. We take words, we take them and we use them for us, and we define them according to our needs. We still allow them to be the authority, and I think it's important for us to, I guess, point fingers. If somebody points a finger at me because of something that I did, then I deserve to have that finger pointed at me. So when we're talking about our inability, our refusal to be African, which that to me is the foundation for us to get along with each other and build what needs to be built in order for us to protect our interest, in order for us to be strong. In order for us to do that, then we have to take back the power to define ourselves, and we have to have our historical understanding of us, our culture, the depth of our spirituality, so that we can't define ourselves. Otherwise, we're just still looking at a blackened European, or however we want to look at it. So the road to understanding, intra-group understanding, the road to empowerment, the road to being able to say this is our culture, that requires what most of us aren't willing to do, and that's to go back, to let go. Okay.
To let go.
In the 70s, early 70s, this white woman came out with a book called Fear Flying. And she was primarily talking to white females in terms of becoming entrepreneurs and leaving, their blah, blah. We have an enormous fear of flying when it comes to us letting go of European culture and European definitions and going back to who is us. Like, I love the way Nana Jahara Clark said, if we knew who we were, if we knew how powerful we are, if we knew what we had done to create the world, build the world, he said, we just walk away from oppression. It wouldn't be a discussion. There wouldn't be, arguments. We just walk away because we know. But we don't want to. We're be very selective in terms of what and who we honor, and then we fight about that, and they cause even greater divisions.
Yeah,
we're not looking at that fragmentation and understanding that that's taking us further and further away from who we are. And that is not to say that African people did not argue.
Right.
That's one of our cultural priority. That's one of our cultural characteristics. We are people who communicate with each other, enormously.
Yes.
So there had to be some argumentation in there somewhere,
and passionately too.
Yes, not playing. So to say that. To say that for us to move backward in order to move forward is going to be done in peace and harmony and love and all the rest of that. That's the ideal. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to maintain as much as is humanly possible. But there's going to be some issues in there we have to work our way through. And there are going to be some people who aren't going to make it. There are going to be some people whose love of everything that works against them is so great that they prefer to die than to be African, which is scary. I've met a few of them, and to me, I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm all of that, but those people scared me in terms of the possibility of us becoming a force to be reckoned with again on this planet, in terms of saving this planet, in terms of returning Ma'at. Which of course is another point, and stop me whenever
Yeah. Because I have another question, but go ahead, finish out your thought.
We are people of Ma'at, truth, justice, order, balance, reciprocity, all this. That's the core philosophical, spiritual guidelines for African people. That was our aspiration when we say you're aspiring to godliness or what have you. Ma'at was the measurement of that. Yes. We live in a reality. We live in a society that is the complete and total opposite of those principles. That has taken each and every one of those principles, flipped it upside down and turned the opposite and glorified it. And now we're glorifying that. So we're trying to work our way back, and nothing's impossible. But to work our way back requires us to understand just how far we have come from who we naturally are. Yeah. And I don't think that most of us are ready or willing for that.
So there's a couple of things that you mentioned, and one was language, right? And the terminologies that we use, and understanding how language shapes our reality, right? And it controls the way that we think and also what we project out. And so I was talking to a sister of mine, and I was telling her how the whole movement of like off-grid living and so forth. Very interestingly, when you think of the term primitive and how they use it and the racial undertone that it has, and I'm like, but if you see someone living off the grid, right? These white people, they don't call them primitive, right? And yet they're living like so many people in the villages in certain parts of Africa who they consider to be primitive, right? So even like using certain terminology to describe melanated people, we got to be careful with that as well. And then the second thing is, while I was driving, rushing to get here to speak to you, we were actually coming from watching the Black Panther movie, and I was telling my husband that I struggle with the movies because I am emotionally detached from them, right? And so I'm watching it, and let me just say it, I'm not easily impressed. And I think he had to explain to me that a part of it is because I have a certain level of knowledge of certain things. And so
Mhm.
when I look at the movies, I'm underwhelmed because I'm just like, this is like crumbs of what our ancestors were already tapped into, right?
Mhm.
These are the little bit that these people could take and put into movies from our, you know, from our
Mhm.
culture, from our
Mhm.
indigenous spiritual practices and so forth. So I'm really
Mhm.
underwhelmed oftentimes. But you talked about language, and I want you to speak to that for a minute. Like, give me some examples to where um, using certain terminologies and how it shapes our reality of Black people. Because you keep mentioning, like, a lot of us are afraid to let go.
Mhm.
Because I think the reality is that we can't imagine or reimagine a world outside of
Mhm.
whiteness. And I am very aware of that because I talk to enough people and you see that apprehension. They're like, what were we gonna do if this happened and that happened? So talk to me about how using certain terminologies to talk about ourselves and how that actually shapes our reality and also how we navigate this matrix.
Oh, it's very, very. I think it's very significant. You said underwhelmed, and I'm the same. I'm very much the same way. And sometimes it feels it's difficult to handle that because it kind of like takes the joy out of some
Mm-hmm.
things, but it's replacing it with insight.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that. It's very difficult for me to sit there. It's very difficult for me to listen to Black comedy because a lot of things aren't, they're not funny to me, not at all. And as a lot of people see that because a whole nother discussion in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, well, not really a whole other discussion, um, is the idea that you laugh to keep from crying.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so much comedy is targeted toward us. So it makes me wonder if the people, if that's the truth, then it says something about us with so much comedy targeted toward us,
Toward it. Mm-hmm.
practice from, so we can't see
Mm-hmm.
or we can be numb to the reality of our situation.
Mm-hmm.
We have to bear in mind that culture is political. I always say everything is political.
Everything.
Everything comes out of culture.
Yes.
It is a cultural creation. So the language, which of course is the heart and soul of everything, because that's you can't think without
Mm-hmm.
words, or images aren't going to get you so far in this reality. But you can't think without words.
Mm-hmm.
Here we like to use the word reconceptualization in terms of this analysis. So
Okay.
when we say when everyday folks, if you will, say slave master, we don't say slave master, we say slave monster, because we need a
Mm.
political definition that helps us understand the middle passage.
Okay.
Okay, this is one of my favorites.
Okay.
Because when you talk about that, depoliticizes the word. It takes the um, the horror of the situation out of it by turning it into a stale concept. So, and I talk to the students all the time. I say, in this house, which is kind of like a shotgun house, I can see the back door from the front door,
Okay.
and there's about a 20-foot hallway that
Mm-hmm.
leads. I said, that's a middle passage through this house.
Okay.
There's no politics or anything involved.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say middle passage about how we got over here, that does not in any way, shape, form, or fashion speak to the horror, the devastation that occurred on that. And there are reasons why those terms are used.
Mm-hmm.
There are reasons why those terms are introduced.
Mm-hmm.
I really like how Ossie Davis, following in Malcolm X's footsteps, if you will, went through the entire dictionary, looked up all the words that meant white and light and all the words that meant black and dark.
Mm-hmm.
And all except for two of each meant, all except for two of the white ones meant good, beautiful, what have you, and all but two of the black ones meant bad, or something ugly. So the language itself is so racist. We can look at it's like from the bottom up. We can analyze this. When you go into your bathroom, when you go into the kitchen, your right hand, the cold water, the handle for the cold water is on the right side, because right is associated with good. They come from cold. Your left hand, which still today for a lot of people is seen as negative.
Yes.
My father was left-handed and he was penalized for it, most of his life.
Mm-hmm.
But the left hand is connected to the hot water and of course hot heat. That's not their priority. When you get to the cities, when you look at the devastating side of most of the cities in Western lands, you see the south side of the cities are the poorest. That's where the black folks tend to live. And in the north side, you see the Gold Coast, Buckhead. You see all of these, and it's like it's so embedded in the city. You can't see everywhere you go. Every street that you name that has a name to it, you are affirming, calling into existence, if you will, the name of a European. And we don't get that.
Yes.
But when they created this, when they put this together, that's what it did. That's exactly what it did. So the language is so, the difference between a soldier and a warrior, and I know some people use the word soldier correctly, but there's a political difference in terms of how we need to conceive soldier versus warrior. The hemispheres, wherever Europeans went, which was unconducive to their mentality and their comfort, they colonized the people. Everywhere they went that was conducive to them, to their environment, to what they loved, they killed the people. They massacred the people. They took over the land. So when you look at Australia, when you look at major parts in Latin America, particularly when you look at the tip of Africa, when you look at the Northern Hemisphere, you see them. But where it's hot, mostly you see us. Now that's changing, of course, with the advent of the air conditioner.
Right.
The point is, their actions have followed their culture. Their language has followed their culture in the naming of everything. I'm trying to think of other reconceptualization. I have a little chart of them. Wow. Of course, whenever you need them, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't think of them. But I know I have a list in Asafo.
Okay.
And I believe, no, not in Message of the Warriors, but in Asafo, where, and I have maybe I'll post the chart tomorrow where people can just look at it and begin to think about how the language is what it is. When you look at the game of chess, that to me is the most revealing. The first lessons that the children get, the first thing I talk about in the chess primer is, white always moves first. You cannot find on the market, and you cannot find on the market a chess game which will allow black to move first. No, there's no such program as that. You can't find a computerized chess game. You can't find a site. You can't find a book that discusses chess in this, well, except for my book. You can't find one that where black moves first. And in chess, if you have people of equal skill, that means white automatically has the advantage. When you go in and you look at the statistics, and I did out of curiosity, you go look at the statistics in terms of the sites, in terms of the games, the percent of games where white won versus the percent of games that black won. White, of course, wins more games because white always moves first. And so it's a language that is, everywhere. If you look at just, and I know I'm talking about a lot of house stuff, but if you look at the wiring, okay, it's color coded. The white is positive, the black is negative. So this is pervasive everywhere we do. It's a dark day. Now, what people who have been around for, I don't know, I'll say maybe 5 or 6, decades can see is the changes in the language that happen so that Europeans could make us forget and then bring it back because we were becoming more like them. The use of black in the news, in the media, when the 60s and 70s kicked in, black folks went off because everything black was bad, everything white was good. It's a dark Monday. It's so, dark and cloudy outside. You heard that constantly whenever you, well, that's a whole other story. It was a constant in the media. White folks responded to that because of money.
Okay.
So they begin to remove that as part of the open conversation in the media. The same way they removed Barbie and G.I. Joe as dolls when people begin to talk about how they incited violence and impossible imageries. But now they're bringing them back because we have readopted this. So now that we think that Europeans and us are the same, that everything is good, they're bringing this back. They're
Yeah.
bringing back this black-white conversation in the language, and we're missing it. Our children are missing it because they weren't made aware of this in the dictionary. They weren't made aware of this in the language.
Baba, my apology. I'm
Right.
going to take a pause for the cause, and I'm going to make sure I let people know that they are here. So I have Just Do It. He says, Peace, Hanifa Nayela. I saw Ene. I want to make sure that Ashan says, Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you, Ashan. Thanks for being here and supporting. We have Wisdom Bars in the house. He says, Baba Baruti is the elder and master teacher needed for this conversation. I completely agree with you. I think I saw my good brother Sir Hale. He says, Hey Hanifa, hey to you, Sir Hale. Thank you for always passing through and showing some love. And I saw a few other people come in. Born Eternal Lord Allah says, Peace, righteous minded family. Peace to you as well. I saw my good brother Dante come through. He says, Good people. Peace to you, Dante. Thanks for supporting the platform. And then we also have Obafemi. He says, Abibi Fahodi, Baba, gratitude to you, Sis Hanifa, for your work and dedication to have these introspective discussions. Much appreciated. Thank you for the love. We have Nova Rain in the house. So I have some questions we're going to go through at some point. So I'm going to come back to you guys' questions. I just wanted you guys to know that I know that you're here. My apologies, Baba Baruti. Let's get back into it. I had another question in as far as you talked earlier about controlled chaos. And first I wanted to ask before I even ask that question, you were just talking about language. So are we saying that language is political? Because I don't think a lot of people think of language that way. Is that what you're saying, that language also is political?
Language is extremely political. And I always say everything is political, but language is extremely political. Just like you mentioned the word primitive.
Yes.
I took several anthropology courses, and that was the term, of course, that was used for anybody who, didn't fit up to those standards or lived in nature or lived like they naturally were. And there's a theory in the social sciences which they downplay when the economy is doing good. You find the theories in the social sciences, the racist ones kick in when the economy is doing bad. And then, they sort of die out when everybody's got a job. And then when the economy's doing bad again, those racist theories kick in. There's a theory called the social evolutionary theory. Okay. And in this social evolutionary theory, there is the idea that moving from hunting and gathering or primitive to agrarian, to industrial, to post-industrial service type economies, that this is a natural evolutionary progress.
Okay.
Being natural evolutionary, that means that you can't change it. It's natural.
Right.
So that means that if you are quote unquote primitive, then this is your natural intellectual ability. That's the limits of how high, how far you can go. And what they did with this, and this was during the time really of European industrialization, and they were trying to prove, how superior they were. They went and they took the countries around the planet and they and ignoring colonization, ignoring enslavement, ignoring destruction. They took the countries and they ranked them from highest to lowest in terms of from being primitive to being, that industrial. And what they discovered was that as you move down, the people got darker.
Of course.
That logic, that evolutionary logic, that's built into the idea. So even now, when they say primitive in their own private situations, when they say primitive in their own classrooms, like I was privy to that, University of Chicago, I think I was usually the only Black person in the class. And in those classes, they forget that you're there. And they use these terms, they turn around and say, well, I didn't mean it like that. But, you know exactly what they mean because they said what they meant.
Right.
When you use terms like primitive, when you talk about us, this is how we're seen. This is how we're seen. And of course, we should be able to reconceptualize that in such a way that's good. Okay. If that makes me primitive, and I do not like that word at all.
Okay.
But if that made me that, then that's good because my ancestors understood the value in having their feet touching the earth.
Yes.
They understood the value in breathing air versus breathing something that's recycled. They understood the value, of me shaking your hand. And that meant that whatever I said I was going to do, it was done. I didn't need, a bunch of lawyers or a piece of paper. It was basic. It was simple. It wasn't complicated by unnecessary words, which became lies.
Yes.
So Yeah, I think that's very now. I lost
Um,
track on what you
okay,
were.
no, you're fine. You're fine. So I was going to ask about control, chaos. You talked about that earlier, and so because we're talking about the importance of culture for Black liberation, when you talk about control chaos, we have a lot of conversations happening right now amongst Black people within this country, and we're having sort of a divide right now. So you have saying, I am indigenous, right? You're not. You
Mhm,
can't trace your ancestors all the way back. You are non-FBA, right? We are
mhm,
different. We are not the same. And as a Caribbean woman, I
mhm,
would be silly to not acknowledge the differences in culture, but
mhm,
I will also be equally as silly to not acknowledge the similarities in
mhm,
culture as
mhm.
well, right? Within the
Absolutely,
diaspora. And for
absolutely.
anyone that understand history, Black history of Black people outside of North America, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And you study any type of writings, anything, you're able to find the similarities. I just gathered with
mhm,
some sisters last night, and we were talking about when we're parenting children, something as simple as
mhm,
we
mhm.
all know what
Yeah,
that means
yeah.
amongst Black people. We
Mhm, yes.
you ain't said, you just made a song to your
Mhm,
children, right? So we were
mhm,
kind of acknowledging those similarities and also those differences. So now current day, the conversation is being had around FBA, non-FBA, right? You know, foundational Black Americans,
mhm,
and there's a divide, and I think of course is connected to the whole reparations movements as well. Now there's a
absolutely.
divide of, you guys are different. You
Mhm.
guys don't love us. You guys never supported us. You guys just kind of like built off of, what we did. So as far, is this a part of control chaos, or is this something of our own making, because whatever we have going on internally?
Well, you set those things in motion.
Okay.
This is a process of making a people menticidal.
Mm-hmm.
You set those processes in motion, then you can step back. It's sort of like you got a sandbox, and you have two brothers in the sandbox, and of course brothers compete, and you give one of them a candy bar in
Mm-hmm.
this context, and
Mm-hmm.
then watch them, or throw a candy bar in the middle of the sandbox and
Okay.
watch them go at it, because you're trying to create the divide. It's um, when you combine the need to be validated by them, the
Yes.
need to imitate them as a form of
Yes.
that validation, a major need and to buy their products,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in terms of your self definition,
Mm-hmm.
then you set up a situation where people are going to battle. They're going to be polarized. Polarized. That's the nature of chaos.
Mm.
Opposing forces where you got this hierarchy. In European
Okay.
culture, everywhere that
Mhm.
it's that hierarchy is so important. Versus us, the hierarchy wasn't so uh, vertical; it's more horizontal, which of course is a whole nother discussion. But
Yeah.
you set up people in such a way that you have the extremes, those who maybe want to be seriously African to those who want to be seriously European,
Mm-hmm.
and any issue that comes along, there's going to be a point of division. To me, the escapists, those who want to move away, run away as far as they can from anything that remotely connects them with being African, those are the ones who will tend to find a way within that argument to say that they're not African. And I'm not,
Okay.
to me, that's my take on that situation,
Yeah.
or any other situation
Mm-hmm.
where why would you spend so much energy? It becomes your life, your life's mission to move as far away from being African as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I began thinking about this. Interesting enough, I began thinking about this in 1990 with the census, and I
Mm-hmm.
was studying the census at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and they were adding this new category of biracial to the category. And what I came to understand was the people who wanted to be called biracial, it was
Mm-hmm.
because they did not want to be connected with being African. They did not want to be connected with being Black. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
because they were trying to create this new category, which would make them, they wanted to get closer to Europeans and
Mm-hmm.
move farther away from being African. So
Mm-hmm.
when I'm looking at groups today who are hell bent on taking us, and I use the word escapist, on
Okay.
taking us as far away as possible from what it means to be African. To me, I see a major problem. But of course, the problem is also on the other side
Okay.
in terms of wanting to debate. But there are so many African proverbs. Once if you argue with a fool, then no one can tell who the fool is, or you become the fool.
You're right.
You know, so it's important to make the point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that all of us, like you're saying, everywhere we go, when the mother gives you a certain look, and there's a certain look that Black women give their children. It's a very and it's common everywhere I've been on this planet. I've seen that look.
Yes.
You know, and it's understood.
Yes.
So instead of looking in that direction, looking in the other direction is extremely problematic if we're talking about, you know, trying to return to who we are. So in the end, you have further and further and further and further and further fragments, further, and this very much feeds that control chaos, because we're not in charge of the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like two people who've been set up to fight, and then you have these bystanders saying, fight, 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 fight. They don't care who wins. They don't care who's fighting. They just want to see the fight, and they're going to make some money off of betting on that fight. Okay, so it's like that. So Urugu remains at the top. Europeans remain at the top of this pecking order in this reality they've created to benefit them. But the only way they can do that, is for us to remain disunited.
Yeah.
For those who are not escapists, remain disunited, and those who are escapists, either to change their mind and recognize, you know, this is who we are, and create a power that's even greater than the one that's oppressing us.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny when you just said that, and I'm going to come to the comments just now, so you can, if you wanted to respond to anything in the comments. And when you just said, it's like the bystanders cheering on, fight, 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 and I came to kind of like the powers of be actually giving weapons to both sides, because they really don't care who. Right. They're happy that you guys are killing off each other. So go ahead. I'm going to give you a weapon. I'm going to give you a weapon. And I'm going to stand on the side and say, fight, fight, fight. Right. But both sides don't know that the other one is being given weapons by the same person. Right. Because they're not talking to each other. Right. But one of the things that, even with the FBA thing, I feel like that sort of bothered me the most. You know, I'm more Pan-Africanist in my thinking, for one. And so I could never really get on board with the whole idea of seeing my Black American sisters and brothers as separate from me, right? Because I think the attempt to almost localize a globalized issue is a problem in itself, because racism, white supremacy is not exclusive to Black Americans. It's a global issue. It's a global virus. And so for me, when I see it happening, I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? You're already a minority in the country, and then you're making yourself even smaller now. Right. And we know how important numbers are, but I wanted to get to some of these comments really, really quickly. To see, because I saw let me see, my aunt says, when I was young, I wouldn't do anything I deemed as negative with my right hand, like getting it dirty, etc. It was weird, and I didn't know why I would do that. Let me see, she used something here in quotes, pure as white.
White as a driven snow white.
Yeah.
You know, the terminology, and it's not the strength of that. The strength, I've been, you know, studying us for decades. And I think I've been part of this movement for decades. But I still catch myself. I still see things that I see that were through this process of socialization. And I used to give an example. A few years ago, I'm in the store and I'm listening to, you know, the music being played. And I find myself, I'm singing these Christmas carols. You know, and I move so far away from that, it's not funny. But the socialization of it, putting that in place, in that fertile soil of a child, putting it in place, it takes on a life of its own, and it just, you know, it rules.
Yeah,
It
I
moves.
agree with you, and it's residual stuff. This is
Hmm.
a lifelong process.
Hmm.
Crypto Vault says in Kemetic culture, our ancestors looked at black as maturity.
Yeah.
Nova Rain says the Spanish were brutal in the Caribbean and Central America, completely wiping out the Aztecs, Incas, and others for material goods on the grounds that all other people and ideas were inferior. Agreed. Let me make sure if I see any other comments or questions that you can respond to. Oh, Yellow had made a mention of something. He said, well, there's also the element of mixed races, people being excluded by full black people. I
Hmm.
can't tell you how many times my black has come into question because of my lighter skin. Did you want to speak to that, Baba Baruti?
Well, I'm going to try to do this in the order.
Oh wait, let me
Okay.
finish out his comment. He said, "Cause this is a continuation.
Hmm.
Because black folks sure pick and choose when the one drop rule applies."
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, I want to say our
You
ancestors
can.
our ancestors understood that space was black.
Mm-hmm,
Understood that carbon is black. Carbon is the base of all life.
mm-hmm,
Okay, we understood the power of blackness. We honored that, greatly. Of course, we looked at our skin and we saw that, and we understood
mm-hmm,
we understood how that worked.
mm-hmm,
So you've had, like I said, flip Ma'at upside down, completely and totally upside down. They flipped what is powerful, what is beautiful upside down. So
mm-hmm,
you've taken, not trying to be funny here, but you've taken, well, I'm not being funny. You've taken ugliness and you've made it the most beautiful thing on the planet.
mm-hmm,
You made it something that everybody's adoring and running toward. And it's the opposite of the reality that existed on this planet for
mm-hmm,
hundreds of thousands of years. So our ancestors, they understood this. They were
mm-hmm,
they were clear on the greatness and the power and the beauty of blackness, but we're not living in that reality. We're not living in a reality where we're making the definitions, and that's part of the process. If you could make African children believe in their blackness at the same time that they connected it to being African, not just, oh, you're black and you're beautiful. No, but you're black and you're beautiful because you're African and what it means to be African.
mm-hmm,
We stop at the black is beautiful and we don't connect it to a story, a history, a legacy that is, as you were saying, not bits and pieces of it thrown together in a movie,
mm-hmm.
but of the whole story as best we can do with what we have learned, what we have read, what we have studied, what we have acquired. Uh,
Okay.
in terms of
Mhm.
the Europeans, real quick, I usually say invasive species when I'm referring to them, because everywhere they have gone, Leonard Jeffries, Death, Domination, and Destruction, everywhere that they have gone. But because they control the definitions and because they control the image, we don't know that. We don't.
Yeah.
Folks need to pick up a copy of Terrence McLaughlin's book Dirt. And I am
Mm.
not one to recommend books by white authors in
Mm-hmm.
terms of us spending our money. That's where we have library cards and all the rest of that, because then we're financing them in that area as well. But folks need to pick up books like that, read Encounter to our children so that they can have a better idea of what happened to the indigenous people. Go to Runoko Rashidi's site and read about the Tasmanians, read about the Australians, and let the children know, let them see and even if they're like, they hear, that means that it's
Yes,
in there.
yes, they do.
That you've done your work.
Yes, they do, and I vouch for that because I know sometimes I would feel I have a 10-year-old. Sometimes I would feel he is not listening until something comes up and he starts to speak to it, and I'm like, oh my, you do be listening,
Yeah.
So I'm with that as well. I wanted to see if you want to answer this one. Has Baba ever encountered any person that was on the FBA aid or stuff? If so, how did you handle it, Baba Baruti?
They don't come to me. just like, in the homosexual community, them Negroes, they don't come anywhere near me. They do not step in this direction. I'm not saying I'm all that bad, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
They don't. It reminds me of when I started teaching at Morehouse, and they knew that I had attended graduate school at the University of Chicago. Most of the people otherwise might have questioned me, might have cornered me. They didn't, because they were afraid of what they thought I might know, what I might say, even if I didn't know anything. They were afraid of that. So it's like the what I have done, what I've written, what Enia and I have created here. They tend to stay away from that, and they know I'm not going to sit and argue with. I'm not going to sit and argue with anyone anyway. I wasn't brought up. I wasn't brought up that way.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about that. I was speak my husband is a part of a group, and I think majority of the people might be Pan-Africanist. And I was asking him the same question: does this conversation come up? And his response was like, absolutely not.
yeah.
Like people who are about building with black people don't even have this ADOS conversation amongst themselves. And these are men from all parts of the diaspora, right? Like different parts, different countries coming together to work together and build. And I asked the question, I was like, so there's no one in there about like FB? He's like, absolutely not. That's not even something that comes up in the space. And I agree with that. I want to shift the conversation a little bit as far as culture. Do we have to have the same cultural beliefs or practices or thinking the same culturally in order for us to unite? Because I know oftentimes when we have the conversation around unity, someone comes in with, and I know you've probably heard this, Baba Baruti, well, black people are on a monolith, right? And I'm just like, duh. But what do we have to be thinking, moving, speaking, dressing, all of that the same in order to get to unify towards a common goal?
No, and I don't think that's possible now or in the foreseeable future anyway. Okay. To me, I interact with people who understand that we are of Ma'at. And that's the aspiration. To me, the vision is what's most important. I've had people apologize to me, particularly brothers. I've had brothers apologize for me for wearing suits. And I'm like, but look at the work that you're doing. I don't care what you wear. I know some folks who walking around full African attired every day, 24/7, 365, who are completely, totally compromised. Who are agents of the state and don't even recognize that they're agents of the state. So to me, it's that believing, okay, I know that I'm African. Now, I might not know I'm African to the degree that you do or apply it in the way that you do, what have you, but I know that my ancestors come from there. I understand that we are at war. Excuse me, my mom would say we're being warred upon.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how I deal with that, my skills, my skill level, my talents, my understanding of politics to the best that I can, I'm fine. Because when you get to that point where everyone has to be the way that you are, and then your numbers and your size and your influence and your ability to move us in that direction shrinks accordingly. That makes people very judgmental, not understanding what got us here. You understand how we got here, but somehow you forget about that when you're talking to folks who don't understand, who don't know. And I'm at one time I didn't know.
Right.
So, and I remember being upset with a brother who, when I began to move in this direction, and I asked him, could you give me a reading list? And he gave me bits and pieces of it as if him giving me the whole thing and me studying would somehow make me more African than him, and then he'd be the African representative in the class. And to me, I found that hurt. Because you're talking this African stuff in our private conversations, and yet when it comes to us trying to, develop in a path, going that same vision somehow, then it becomes this competition. I expect that from folks who I would then, I know better now, but then I would have expected that from people who were as unclear as me.
Right.
At that time, but I didn't expect that from somebody who knew. And of course, I've met Black folks who every day they're in African attire and they're crystal clear and they're moving on that clarity.
Right.
But I don't think that it's right now. I don't think it's possible because we're still almost at breakneck speed running away from what it means to be African. We haven't stopped running away from it yet. We haven't stopped fragmenting yet. It's like this is something that's got to run its course. You can't stop that because we're not in the position to finance its direction. We're not in a position to make people listen. I can't make you African.
Mm.
All I can do is set an example, which is something that to me is probably the best advice to somebody who is trying to help nation build, trying to help build African. Be African.
Mm.
Be African. Be that African. Don't go around proselytizing, trying to get people to. About somebody comes to you and says, what do I need to read? Well, give them this book, or say, go read this book. And when they come back, then we can have this discussion, and then say, read this book and read that book based upon what you do not understand. If we're worried about, and this isn't to take away from that, but if we worried about more about us being more of Ma'at,
okay,
we worked on ourselves individually, which is, that's what I'm doing now. That's what Beanie I's doing now. Working on our individual selves, then it manifests itself collectively in those people who are around you, who see some value in that, or maybe even a step ahead of you in terms of that movement. But the vision, it's the path is going to be different because we're different people. We have different histories, even though we're differently decided. So the unification is not going to be the same, and we didn't have it on the continent.
Right.
You had people who specialize in this, and they believed in things in this particular way, but they understood about spirit, they understood about the Creator, they understood about Sasaya, Mother Earth, they understood all these things. They just understood it in their particular way, and that core was there for all of them.
So I want to go back a little bit to Black culture. You mentioned it being a subculture, right? Did you say okay? Well, so go ahead.
I would say there are aspects of this that people can think of different things that are called culture.
Okay.
So we say a drug culture. We say a hip hop culture. We say a youth culture. These are subcultures of this larger culture.
Okay. So when we talk about Black culture, because I know when people say African, most people say, well, which part of Africa? And I think you just kind of spoke to that too, that even though they had their differences, there were some commonalities as well, as far as like spirituality and those type of things. So if I'm a person, like I'm just coming into the knowledge of self, right? And someone is like, well, African culture. And I ask, well, which country are we talking about? How do you address that question when you talk about being African and someone says, well, what is African? Because there's over 52 countries in Africa. What are we talking about?
And many, many more, I'll say ethnic groups, which I want to explain.
Yes.
But we started out this journey trying to figure out which African group we wanted to study. So, so we could emulate. And we ended up with the Akan, but the elder sister who we talked to, she said it doesn't make a difference because at the core, they're all the same. You study who you want to study among ethnic groups. Over time, I try to correct people when they say African cultures, because these are ethnic groups within an African culture.
Okay.
So the Yoruba, the Akan, the Ewe, all of these are different ethnic groups within the African culture. And what Europeans have done, they have us, that creates divisions because cultural differences are much, much larger than ethnic differences. So these are, to me, you have all of those different ethnic groups within a culture. So when I look at Europeans, when I look at Spain or the Spanish, I look at Portugal and Portuguese, I look at the British, but those are different European ethnic groups, which also helps me to frame the language that I use, because that allows me to understand this is a nation of people.
Yes.
Europeans are a nation of people, even though their violation of us was different. Their exploitation of us might have been different. I shouldn't say was different. Might have been different here and there. The heart is still the same. The mind of Europe, it's a constant from one to the next. Okay, so it's like in this, I guess, a kind of a weird example, maybe the person, the dry cleaner in Harlem, who doesn't know the dry cleaner in LA, who doesn't know the dry cleaner in Houston, who doesn't know the dry cleaner in Bismarck, North Dakota. All four of them will systematically exploit African women in terms of how much it costs to press a blouse. They're not having a conversation. They're not on the phone with each other. They're different personalities, operate in different ways, but all of them know because that's the nature of their heart. All of them know to exploit in the best way possible.
That's
All of them
Asili.
know,
That's the Asili.
yes, all of them know that white is family. All of them know that. The slavers that brought us over here, all of them knew to destroy, to misfeed all the rest of the African people, and all of the ones who brought indentured European servants over here knew to treat them very, very different. Because the concept of family was very different. And these are from different European ethnic groups, or if you want different European countries or different European groups or what have you. But all of them knew that heart was there. That Asili, as you just said, that Asili was common. That was there, just like our Asili is common. So our interpretation of the Creator is, and I love when I'm reading a book, particularly by a continental African who has studied it up close, personal, having come out of it, where they're looking at multiple different African ethnicities and they're pulling out those things that are the same, and those things that are the same are the heart and soul of the spiritual systems.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
So all over the continent, you find in these different ethnic groups, you find the word grandfather used in reference to the Creator. All of them use grandfather. Well, I say most of them use grandfather in reference, and they're not, they came up in different places. But that common sense of kinship with the Creator, that wasn't something that they developed together, if you will. Not to say that they didn't start one core place and then that
migrated out.
It still would make them one culture. Still make them one culture. So for me to save my mind, to save having to explain and rationalize each and every single difference, is these are just ethnic groups, okay, who have a common culture. So the color for this ethnic group, the regal colors for this ethnic group might be red and white. The regal color for this ethnic group might be purple. The royal color for this ethnic group may be green. But the heart and soul of the ceremony is the same. Go ahead.
No, sorry. So I have a question in the chat, but there's a question that just came up as you were speaking, and I'm gonna let you respond to it, Yellow, because he had a follow-up question. He says, so as a mixed person, hey Yellow, first of all, thanks for being here and thanks for your questions. I appreciate you. He says, so as a mixed person, do I just flat out ignore my white side in favor of my black side to be African, or can I embrace both?
For me, you're asking me this question.
Yes, he is.
For me, I know that we're being warred upon. I know where my allegiance lies, and it lies with African people. I understand the concept of enemy. I don't deal with Europeans in any capacity whatsoever. So for me, that would be an easy choice. It may not be so easy of a choice when this is part of your family. Okay, but for me, it's very, very clear cut. It's very, very clear cut. And when it comes to something like that, and I've had conversations with brothers in particular who mom was white, dad was black, and they understand what I'm saying when I say that. Understanding Chancellor Williams and his Destruction of Black Civilization, other folks, where this was a tool. Europeans, everywhere they went, they created a mulatto group, if you will. And I don't say that word negatively, even though people might take it that way. I don't, because I don't have a better word for it. They created these populations everywhere. And if I wanted to look at this in the context of global war, then Europeans have reached a point decades ago where they realized, and this is also the beginning of regentrification, all the rest of this, where they realized that people look like you and I were waking up, and they needed to set up forts. They also need to increase the size of that group of individuals between them and the dark hordes. So everywhere Europeans went on this planet, everywhere they went, they raped the women. They created this class of children who were given the privilege of being almost white and given the power to rule over their own people, so that when the people went off, they attacked that group and left them alone. We saw that in the rebellions in the DC when Martin Luther King was assassinated, when Malcolm was assassinated, and you had the European Jews
Mm-hmm.
were owned the stores and the businesses in and around the black areas in DC. And that got attacked, but the police were around that to make sure they get further into the larger
Right.
white areas.
Right.
So I said, like for me, it's really clear cut, and I hope that it will remain the same for me. If one of the people who was responsible for my birth, also, because to me this is a very political thing. We can work out the details of it once we've won.
Mm-hmm.
At this particular point, I'm going with my core.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because the destruction of black civilization automatically came to mind. Also the whitewashing, the attempt in places like Brazil and so forth, in so many ways, how that was, right, like you say, weaponized, like deliberately, where people were literally planted, in these places, so to whitewash the population, right? Especially if the population was predominantly African. I had a question real quick for you. My phone went off. Okay, so my question is this: is someone might say, what do you say to someone who say, do I need to be African or identify as African to counter white supremacy? Can't I just be myself and do that? Why is there a need for me to identify with Africanness? What do you say to that?
Well, you have to me, you have to identify with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's like a bland statement, but the political requirements of being a human being require that to me, it requires that I move toward that which is righteous, that which is me, that which I came from. Now, that doesn't mean that I understand it enough to, embrace it in that way and be so loud with it, et cetera, et cetera. But I do need to know the difference between, good and evil. Okay. It's that clear cut for me. And I want to be on that side and identify with that which is the good. It's a matter of degree in terms of how vocal you are with it, or how much pride you walk around carrying it, with you, et cetera, et cetera. But still, without identity, you're nothing. That's what Europeans want us to be: super extreme individuals who have no connection to anything, and that means they can be led anywhere. I can't be led anywhere because my ancestors aren't going to allow me to go but a certain distance in any direction before I get yanked back. I have a God. I have a system. I have an ancestral system. I have a tradition. I have an interpretation of reality. I have a worldview that comes out of a people who know who they are and have known who they are for tens of thousands of years. And that guides me in this reality of super extreme individualism, where they don't want you to know, they don't want you to be able to identify yourself as anybody. They want you to walk around saying that you are an individual, because that feeds your Urugu system. That feeds their world. As long as everybody is super individualized and a bunch of individuals, then there's going to be no coming together to any degree, and we're able to rule. We're able to completely and totally rule the world.
While they come together.
Yes.
This is what blows me with us, right? We don't want to unify, right? Well, we don't want to find one thing to unify under. And these people unify under whiteness. Yes. And we are debating whether we should call ourselves this or that. We don't want to unify under one thing. And for me, I personally think that, and even within myself, I have to check that, right? I think it's a cop-out. I think it goes back to what you talk about in the beginning, that a lot of us are not really willing to go the distance, right? It's like, I'm comfortable here. Leave me alone. I don't want to have that conversation. All the while, there is a group of people who are unified, even though they have their own ethnicities within whiteness. Like you said, they unify under the umbrella of whiteness to war upon non-black people of the earth. And non-black people are sitting down at the bottom having conversations about being non-black. And what does that mean? And we want to debate it, and we want to dissect it and analyze them, put it under a microscope, all the while we're being warred upon. That is what I'm sorry, Baba Baruti.
No,
That is
no.
kind of what bothers me. I can't wrap my head around that at all. Because my thing is this. We had a conversation not too long ago, and I'm gonna get to some of these comments real quick. We had a conversation not too long ago, and it was around race as a social construct. And if you want to speak to that, you can. We had two conversations. One on my friend's page about capitalism, and then on my page, we on my platform around race as a social construct, right? And for me, I can acknowledge what social constructs are. So many things are social constructs, right? When you understand what a social construct is. But then you have us who we want to, it's very interesting that we want to zoom in as on the racial piece as a social construct, right? To have a full-blown conversation about, right? I would dare say how we define crime is a social construct, right? There is things that people this country can do on the macro level, right? And no one is held accountable for it. But if it's done on the micro level, right, then you have someone has to be arrested, so in other words, it depends on who is doing the crime. So it is a social construct, but we don't talk about that. So I can understand that there are social constructs, race being one of them, and also understand that even if I know it's a social construct, it's a construct that's being weaponized against me. So there's something that must be done. And in that sense, I can't sit there and say, oh, well, I'm just a spirit being. I'm not willing to do that. But I want to get to the questions real quick. So he, what is it? I know Yellow had come follow up with something else. I think he was saying, that he says, well, it would become a version of self-hate for me to hate a part of my true self. He's talking because he's mixed, right? So it would become a part of self-hate if he hate one part of himself. And he says, same way if I embrace my white side in favor of my black side. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, because I would prefer not to, because I have my own thing around this, but I'm going to let you go ahead and speak to that.
Well, I just want to quickly say, to me, that feeds into a meaningless, distractive, debate where we could be forever talking about whether this is hurting or helping white folks. We're at war. To me, it's that clear and it's that simple. And either in war, either you're on my side or you're not. There isn't, I don't go over and interview every person who's got a gun pointed at me to see if they have a good heart or whether they, what have you. I don't deal with any of that, which is why that's not part of the conversation here or in my house. We're at war. We're being destroyed.
Yes.
So to debate on whether, Europeans are good to any degree, to me, is irrelevant.
Right. As Malcolm X, it goes back to the interview Malcolm X had when they asked him that question. I mean, no, it I think, it was Malcolm, I think. Or am I thinking Muhammad Ali when he was asked about what about the good white people? And he was like, I'm not willing to take, So Ashan, I know, says, how you say you're not black, then say one drop is a racial construct. I'm not sure what that question means, Asha, if you can expound on it. Maybe you did at some point. Okay. Let me see. I want to make sure I cover anyone that have questions. Yellow says, okay, or why is it need to deny my white side to qualify as black enough? I think he's spoken to that numerous times already. Trigger Happy says black is important, but black can be ambiguous if not attached to African. Ashan says biracial, white, black, all labels, someone constructed. And his follow-up was, what does it mean? And I'm assuming Ashan is saying like why are we making I don't know. I feel like it's like, why are we making a big deal out of it if it's all constructed by people? Yellow says it means everyone gets to pick and choose who can be in their club. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. He's not saying. I want to make sure if you guys have questions, that's what I'm kind of want to get to, the questions. Wisdom Bar says, can Baba give some examples on how Black American culture and diaspora culture are similar?
There are some common cultural characteristics of African people.
Okay, Ashan, I see you.
Globally. So, I mean, something as simple as drumming, communicating. I mean, it's like for us, here, try to sell me a song that doesn't have any bass in it. Try to sell me a song that doesn't have a beat to it. Try to show me a song that has a military march, like most of the music that came out of heavy metal in the 60s and 70s was. Okay, so that respect for elders, respect for ancestors, appreciation of the creator. These are commonalities that you find for African people on the continent and for Africans here. The need to communicate, the sense of communalism or communality. You know, we firmly believe in that. As much as our families have been destroyed, then we still have more extended families than any other group of people on this planet. We should have less. We should have much less, but we still have more because we firmly believe in family. For the most part, we still firmly believe in marriage, even though that's becoming more and more of an issue because of the reality that we are in right now. Not because that's us, but because of the reality that we are in. So there are, to me, there are a lot of commonalities, some not so strong, but the drumming is huge. You know, everywhere we go, the drumming is huge, and every time I go out, I feel the vibrations off of some young person's car. It tells me, you know, that's real. That's still part of us. You know, nobody got to that person and said, you know, you're an African. You need to have some speakers in your car that blow out your windows. No, we understand the power to beat. They feel it. If we don't feel it, which maybe that should be another one of those characteristics. I know when I was young, it was the degree to which Black folks emotionally feel things, the degree that other people do not. Which is one of the reasons why you have so many of us locked up in spiritual systems, which can be an exceptionally good thing, or religion, or what have you. So it's that emotional content. Well, some of the studies, I don't think it was Browder. That was one of the studies that talked about how Black folks become more emotionally attached to actors in the media than other groups do. So that emotional attachment, that emotional feeling is there.
But Baba, okay, so we have I know, and now because I was going to ask this question, interestingly, Juana came in and commented to it, because I know that when we talk about wheat being water upon, this is a tough one for me specifically. I'm going to tell you, because I think that integration played a big role in our perception of being water upon. Like my husband says all the time, it's no longer in our living room. So we think it no longer exists, right? And so Joanna is saying the only war is with so-called Blacks with themselves. If you're living in comfort, you are not in a war. And I know there's a lot of people who believe that, Black people, because I'm just going to say it. When it comes to trauma, that our people have experienced, it is often at the hands of other Black people, right? And so when you end up in conversations, they will say, it's not a white man who robbed my mother. It's not a white man who killed my brother. And so these conversations become more difficult to have. And they'll be like, no, the only people who are a threat to me are people that look like me. So to Joanna's point, she's saying, if you're living in comfort, you are not a war. Do you want to respond to that? Because I hear that a lot.
The first thing I would tell people, read Amos Wilson. His Black on Black violence, his self-hatred and self-defeat. Read those books. It brings clarity in a way that I can't explain it in you know, a short period, maybe even a long period of time. But you're in a situation where things have been put into place where you don't know that you're being warred on, that you believe that you are at peace. The media is a weapon of war. Okay? The occupations you live in is a weapon of war. African people by default are not geared to the level of stress that Europeans are, because that's not our nature in terms of how we came into existence as societies. So the level of stress that we are on, more Black women are dying from heart attack, heart disease, strokes than any other group of women. That's the number one killer for African women. To me, that's a form act of war. When you have to worry about, you know, the condition of your husband, whether your husband's going to get home, whether your son's going to make it to his school, all of these are, to me, this stress is an act of war. It's not accidental for you to have to worry about that. That says that subconsciously, you know, that something is horribly wrong. You shouldn't have to worry about these things. These things shouldn't be an issue. To sit in front of an idiot box and it just completely and totally bombards you with ideas and issues of perversion and insanity to the point where you begin to think like that, or you begin to appreciate. That's an act of war. Someone has committed war against your mind. That's part of the war effort. The problem is that when we think about war, we think about physical violence. We think about people shooting each other. We think about people bombing each other. And even though that, yes, that's a major part of war, that's not the only part of war. And when as war becomes more sophisticated, just like when controlling people becomes more sophisticated, you don't have to stand over them with guns. You don't have to have them in shackles anymore.
That's true.
The way that you have them thinking that has them blaming each other, has them blaming themselves for what they've done, the victim blaming mentality. When that becomes the dominant way out of which they think and they interpret themselves, and then you keep them in a situation where they have to see each other as victims, where they see each other as victims, then you end up with them warring, if you will. I don't know if I call that warring, but I guess warring on each other because they don't have any other. Crime is a function of proximity to a significant degree. That means that people who live next to each other tend to commit crimes against each other versus somebody who lives on the other side of town. And when you start looking at the statistics in that way, more white folks are violent toward white folks and black folks are violent toward black folks. It's just that the presentation of that in the media, since they control the media and control the image of them in the media, gives it the appearance. That's not to say that you being raped or beat or shot or what have you is not real. That just means that we need to measure it in terms of what makes us think in this way, what makes us be the kind of people who see each other as enemy. How do we get to this point where we see each other as enemies? I'm wondering, did this go back to the slavers where we're fighting over a little gruel, a little bit of food? We're fighting each other over a little bit of food, and we become hateful in that way. Did that happen on those ships when one of us died and we had to push that person, the other person, because we didn't want? Where did all this begin? We weren't like this. So something happened in the process. Something happened to make us self-hating and therefore hating of each other, because hating of each other is an extension of self-hatred. That's the extension of it. We look at it the other way around.
Yeah. I know that there were some other people that had some questions. I know Wisdom Bar had a quick question. He said, how does spirituality play a role in developing a culture for African people? So wait, Ruthie, before you answer that, I want you to incorporate this piece as well. Unifying with other black peoples that may have other spiritual systems, I guess you would say, because for example, you have people who may be Christians. Majority of our people in America are Christians, right? What does that look like? You say, how does spirituality play a role in developing a culture for African people? How does that look when you have people that have different spiritual practices or different religious beliefs?
And when we look at that, we have to understand that religion is a political weapon. A lot of folks involved in spiritual systems, that's part of that political weapon as well. It's not something innocent that just came out of the blue.
Yep.
These are political weapons in the hands of the people who are responsible, for bringing them to us or forcing it upon us. And that's not to say that it's wrong. When you have a people who are spiritually grounded and this is their only outlet, they over generations, then they come to embrace that, and then that becomes their norm. But we don't want to look at those in terms of them being. We act like that's something completely and totally separate. But our major scholars, Dr. Ben, John Ray Clark, all of these folks helped us to understand and explain. Religion is a weapon. It's a tool. It is one of the institutions that Europeans use against us to keep us pacified, to keep us under control.
That's one of the 9 human activities that Neely Fuller spoke to. All of that, and that's why I'm like, there is nothing. Law, media, sex, religion, all of it is racism, white supremacy has its hand in it, and I think a lot of people believe that somehow their religion was exempt from that for whatever reason. Let me just go through. Okay, I know Juana commented, trauma and feelings are not facts, though. Blacks are battling mental demons in their minds. Blacks need mental health, not social commentary. So does white people. In fact, the most mentally disturbed people on the planet are actually European people. But that's a conversation for another day, I guess. Nova Rain says by unifying on the blackness on black people. Baba Baruti, I know you're laughing at what I'm saying, but one of the things that I think that we don't do, and I think Mama Annie, Marimba Annie, did that in the book Urugu, is that we don't really understand how Europeans work, how the European mind functions, the asili of the European culture, right? And so we start to say things like black people are the most threat, the biggest threat to other black. Like we say things like that because we really don't understand what we're dealing with. And I know for myself, I wasn't always there in understanding the grand scope of things. I get it. And I know how that could feel, because the truth be told is this. If I'm gonna give a quick example and I'm gonna move on, because I know I wanna wrap up with you. It's like this. If I'm in a house with another child, like if I'm a child in a house with another child, and the adult created a hostile environment, okay? And the adult is the authority. The adult has the power, right? The power to do what? Define reality, right? And so it's a hostile environment. The adult takes themselves out of the equation, leave me and the other child in the house. We begin to fight each other, right? Because of the environment that we are in. And when I say hostile, I mean like there's not enough food. There's not enough, and so we start to fight each other. So of course I see my sibling or the other person as the enemy. Why? We're talking proximity, right? We're talking disempowerment. Okay. I think that the system of racism is such a Goliath in the minds of most of our people that it's overwhelming. It's just easier for me to speak to Ababa Baruti and come at you and attack you, because it's just, proximity is just easier. You're the low hanging fruit. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's a little frustrating sometimes. And I'm trying to be nice here, actually. Nova Rain says by unifying under blackness on black people, then only unifying with those that white people initially permitted them to unify with. He's saying, could other forms of unity achieve the same goals better?
I'm trying to
understand the question.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand that middle part. Aren't black people then only unifying with those that white people initially permitted them to unify with? I'm not clear.
That part I'm not clear on. Yeah, I am clear on the last part. Yes. Could other forms of unity achieve the same goals better? So I'm guessing unifying under other things other than blackness, just blackness.
Well, to me, the main unifying force should be that we're African. That should be the main unifying force, and that culture, understanding that culture, understanding who we are, what we're supposed to be about. Understanding, as you just said, Mama Rumba's statement about we don't understand Urugu. We don't understand what they're about. We don't understand how they got into the position that they're in. We just assume that it was something natural. For many of us who are vanquished, we believe that Europeans were correct, that this war was supposed to be waged, that Europeans were supposed to win because they're right and we're not, that they are righteous for everyone. I remember a student years ago saying, yeah, well, if Europeans weren't supposed to be in charge, then God wouldn't have put them in charge. That type of mentality where our analysis is so superficial that we can't understand Urugu for what it is. We can't understand the mentality that creates that. I often say, and it helps students sometimes to understand it. So whenever I meet a European, the first thing I see, they are looking to see if you're a friend or foe. No matter what the situation is, they're always looking to see if you're a friend or foe. And from that point, that will determine the nature of the interaction after that. But the first measurement is of whether you are a threat or not. What kind of mind does that? What kind of mind thinks in that way? And that kind of mind has molded us into the kind of people who are blaming ourselves for the situations that we are in. Blaming ourselves for our environment and are blaming ourselves for the mentality that we have acquired toward each other. We don't have the same mentality toward Europeans. The self-hate needs to be reserved primarily for us. And that has a lot to do with the threat. We know back here that Europeans were killed for nothing. We know that. I don't care how much we want to be Negro. I don't care how much we want to say, white folks are cool and they wouldn't do. We know back here, and that frames our behavior in their presence.
Mm-hmm.
It also frames our behavior in our presence because we're mad at the situation that we're in. And who we're venting on are those individuals who are easiest to access. Just like a predator, a rapist, a child molester, they're going to go after those victims that they see are most easily victimized. And this is what we're doing. And we don't, because we don't understand Yurugu.
Yeah, I'm starting to come to terms with that, Baba Baruti, to be honest with you, to the point where there's just certain conversations I no longer want to engage in. It's just futile. It really is at this point. But I want you to in closing, I want you to speak to because one of the things I wanted to talk about is the importance of culture for African liberation, right? And before I had this show, I was like, I know there are people who actually don't feel that Black people they actually feel like Black people are free and we're not oppressed. So to even use the term liberation to some people is like liberation from what, right? So I want you to speak to the importance of culture in African liberation. What role does culture play in the liberation not only of our minds but of our bodies in this war? Can you speak to that in closing, please?
For me, culture is our story. Culture is what some people call history, but it's our story. It is an understanding of who we are at heart, or you say heart, your heart and soul, of the kind of people we are, of the kind of reality that we have to have in order to be who we naturally are, the kind of reality that must exist in order for us to be who we naturally are, which of course we have to look back to our ancestors for. And culture encapsulates all that. It explains all that. It gives you the definitions of who you are. It gives you your rules. It gives you your traditions. It gives you your guidelines. It gives you your rituals. And it may not necessarily distinguish, tell you got to do this ritual or do that ritual, but the end result of those rituals is supposed to be the same. The heart and soul in those rituals are the same. And at the same time, your culture defines what you are against, what you cannot be under in order to be yourself. And that dictates what you fight against.
Okay.
Automatically. So the role of culture in terms of self-definition, in terms of war, in terms of creating reality, because reality is a creation. It doesn't just come into existence on its own. It's created and it's maintained by people who are operating out of a particular culture, out of a particular cultural framework. But we can't do that unless we know who we are. Okay? And I'm not talking about blending hodgepodge of this and that. You go back to the origins. You go back to the original. You go back to the start. You don't stop halfway back conveniently because you get a little tired. You go all the way back to your origins and you move from there like everybody else. No people has ever come to power and remained there and forgot about their traditions. None. No people ever come to power and remain there, dismiss their tradition, dismiss their ancestors. None who came to power were also self-hating. They accepted other people's definitions of them to the point where they saw themselves as less than human, as less than worthy of seeing other people as their route to success, to survival. Okay, so you say freedom from what? Freedom from what you are not. But of course, you have to know what you are not in order to fight for freedom out of it.
Yeah. Well, what are we? Because I know this is a question I see in the chat and it comes up a lot. And what is the way? Okay, we know that there are certain things that have gotten us in the conditions that we're in right now. Where is the personal accountability as far as Black people? What are some things that you can mention that we need to be personally accountable for? I could start off with the way we treat each other, right? But even though there's a self-hate that is kind of guiding that, how do we begin to undo that so that we can start loving first ourselves and then loving each other so that we can interact with each other a little bit more positively?
Part of that, of course, and you know as well as I, and you were saying that there are lots of parts to that, but part of it I think a lot of people don't think about is that the mental side is deep. How we look at ourselves negatively is extremely deep. And if we're going to move out of that, recognizing and maybe studying, thinking, blah, 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 we have to understand this is going to take some time. We've been brought up in a reality where impatience rules. We have to understand this is going to take some time, and to be patient with ourselves as we move toward that self-realization, that respect and love for self, which allows us to be in the company of other like people and to move forward. Okay, that takes a lot of time. It took a lot of time for us to get here. So it's going to take a lot of time for us to move away from that. But if you understand, just take one step. You said how we treat each other. I'm going to say I'm going to add in there how we rear our children.
Yes.
Okay? So if you understand, as I understood coming up, because my mother made it perfectly clear, and so did my father. My mother made it perfectly clear: you don't spoil a child into a reality that's trying to kill them. They have no strength. They have no backbone. They have no perseverance. They have no resilience. So for us if we understand who we are, then one of the first things that we need to do is to make sure our children are reared strong. Okay, that they are thinking individuals, not rote, memorizers, not uncreative creators who can't really create because they can't think for themselves, but to be individuals who are not controlled by other people's things. Even though they may want or get those other people's things, but are not controlled by those other people's things, because that makes it so easy to manipulate our children in any way that anybody wants to, because we don't have the resources that other people have. So anybody else who has other resources, i.e. enemies who have more resources than they can manipulate our children in any direction they want to.
Yeah.
Children have to be weird. We talk about loving children. To me, spoiler, just child abuse. Major form of child abuse, because we are not giving our children the strength that they need to battle what they need to battle in order to be human. It's almost like we're using our children as shields. It's an enemy. Because we know that if we don't spoil our children, then the enemy is going to come after us.
That's a good point. They're rearing the children. Baba Baruti, we're going to close out shortly. In the next 5 minutes, I'm going to speak to this. You don't have to respond to this. Joanna Washington, and I know you're listening. Here's what I'm going to say. Baba Baruti, how many books have you written, Baba Baruti?
28.
Okay, Baba Baruti has 28 books that he has written, ma'am. I would suggest that you Google him, go on his website, go buy his books. There is nothing where he is teaching, right? Because you're speaking to this panel. You said this panel, and you do this quite a bit. So I feel the need to address it tonight. This panel doesn't believe blacks are responsible for fixing themselves. Pause. Go find, how many books again, Baba Baruti?
28.
Go try to get at least 10 out of the 28 books. And I promise you're not going to find in there where Baba Baruti is teaching anything about us not being responsible for fixing ourselves. In fact, he just gave one example: educating your children. Okay, that is taking responsibility for ourselves, for how we begin to create and cultivate self-love within ourselves, so that we can see our brothers and sisters, right, in a more positive light. Then you say only the white man can fix them according to them. No one on this panel believes that only the white man can fix us. Okay, and that's not according to us. I need you to listen to the conversation from a non-biased view, from a non-self-hating view. And Baba Baruti, I have to say this because I know the sister. She's been on my panel before. That's not what's being said here. So try not to put words in our mouth. Okay, Baba Baruti is an elder that have been working in the struggle as far as liberating black people, and no one that knows him will ever say that he feels that we are not responsible for fixing ourselves. That is the work that he is doing, and I certainly do not believe that. That is why I educate my own children. That is why I am constantly finding ways to unplug. This is why I bring people like Baba Baruti to this platform to have these conversations, just in case maybe your grandchild or your niece or your nephew might be going through social media in the next, 5 years, and just come across a video like this. where all the images out in the public is negative, and they come across a Baba Baruti talking to Hanifa, and they get some encouragement that there's nothing wrong with their blackness. In fact, they can be just as self-sufficient as anyone else. So be careful about putting words in anyone on this panel's mouth, because no one up here believes what you are trying to project onto us. I just wanted to address that, because that is a lie. And stop projecting that, because that is not what's being said. Now, in closing, Baba Baruti,
Yes.
I want to say thank you for coming here, and I'm going to bring you back. But I just wanted you to just close up with saying, like, what are the main things we should be prioritizing now, not as Black people, but as African people? You mentioned children. That's one of them. What are some other things that we should be prioritizing right now, as far as unlayering some of the damage that has been done to us as a people, and to begin the work of remembering ourselves?
I think a huge chunk of that, and it doesn't require reading 40,000 volumes. There are certain books that can move you in a particular direction of self-understanding, which I would argue cause us to think better. Okay, so there are certain books that we can read that will make us understand we need to buy Black, but we need to buy politically Black. We need to understand the politics of the person who we're buying from. If we're talking about building something that's African, because you can be buying from somebody whose the money is just immediately going to enemies. So to me, reading is very important, and it's not like you got, when you say reading to people, then it's for a lot of them it's scary, and the statistics show in terms of the number of books that African people read, African Americans would have you read while they're in school, as well as once they finish school. But there are certain single books that, to me, get you started moving in that direction of understanding who we are and what we are about. So you can read, oh, this is what African care, and this is like completely, totally different than the way people behave today. So why this difference? But there are certain books that we can read. Reading books about Ma'at, reading books about Kemetic society, and not just them reading about traditional African spiritual systems. I would argue people need to read my book, Identity, read my book, Kebuka, because those will get you started in a particular direction in terms of understanding how we got here, what it was that made us what it he said, from the pyramids to the projects. What brought us to that, and our responsibility. Read something by Garvey. Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Read something by Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Read his Message to the People. Okay. It will give you guidance as to your thinking. It won't tell you what to think. Yeah. It won't tell you what to do, but it'll give you the fuel that you need to find your own way into what it is that we need to do. Nobody should be telling anybody exactly what to do. Experience of our warrior ancestors, the experience of those who are amongst us today who are working for us, it should give us some guidance as to what we need to do. Because we should know, we should be intelligent enough to know something is wrong. Okay. Either something's wrong with this system, something's wrong with Yurugu, or innately, biologically, something is wrong with us. We were just born this way. Yeah. Something is wrong somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So in closing, tell me about Kebuka. Kebuka, right?
Yes, Kebuka. It's our annual, this is our 17th celebration of our ancestors. So I guess it's about a 2-hour lecture on from the point of our capture to the point of our arrival here. It's based on a book, which is a story in and of itself, that's entitled Kebuka. And the most exciting part of it to me, and the reason why I'm so excited about it this year, is because the children are returned. With the COVID mess for 3 years, we didn't do it live. We did it online. To me, that wasn't anywhere near as good. But the children, they demonstrate the 3 most common positions Africans were packed in on the slave ships. And I watched it from the first time. The adults got so quiet when the children got up and demonstrated. I mean, you could hear a pin drop on a pin on the floor. It got so quiet in there. Nobody moved. It was like folks just stopped breathing. It was so beautiful. So I'm expecting, I want to feel that again. I want to understand that again. That sent people away looking for, how do I do this? how do I solve this? What is my work? What do I need to do from the children?
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, if I could take my lecture out of it and just put the children there to do their thing and people could see that and then they go, I'd be happy. Okay, well, people need to understand everything around what the children are doing at the same time. So this Saturday from, I believe, 5 to 9 at the Sweet Spot here in Atlanta, we're going to be doing that lecture event live. It's also going to be streamed.
Mm-hmm.
The information is on my page. It's been on my page for days, and it's going to be on my page until Saturday.
Tell me the website so I can put. I was just going to say that.
Okay, now it's not on a website. It's going to be my Facebook page.
Your Facebook page, right. And that's your name.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or Enia's, if they're, Enia has it on her page as well.
Okay. So you guys can check it out. It is free, you said?
It's not free. The prices are graded based upon children, individuals, married couples, families.
Okay.
But that's all out there. They can see that when they go to the page as well.
Okay. All right. Well, Baba Baruti, I am going to bring you back because I have another topic I want to talk to you about as well. I want to tell you thank you for giving me your time. I apologize for my tardiness. But thank you for waiting and knowing me well enough to know that if I didn't show, something was wrong. Yes. I appreciate that. Yeah. But I'm going to definitely bring you back. I'll reach out to you again to tell you the topic. But I want to tell you thanks for coming here and giving us some information and some knowledge to build on. And where can we find your books?
They're at www.akobenhouse, AKOBENHOUSE.com. That's www.akobenhouse.com.
Okay. And all your books are on there. And you said Identity is your more recent one?
Yes, Identity is the last one.
Okay. Yes. That one I have to get. All right. Well, again, Baba, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for the missus for allowing you to be here with us as well. I appreciate you guys. I'm going to go ahead and let you go and get back to your family. And I'll be in touch with you about bringing you back as well.
I appreciate you allowing me to come on. I enjoyed myself.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. That's it. If you guys want to check out his website, it is akobenhouse.com. If you want to get any of his books to read, you can always check him out on there. I did want to say, Joanna, since I don't have a problem with you, I'm just going to say this. If you said this, if it's a requirement that I agree with you, there's a difference. There's people in the chat right now. Action Potential. There's many people in the chat that have questions that had pushback. Yellow was one. Ashan was asking questions. There's a difference in asking questions and making accusations, sis, right? And I come from a culture where I hold elders in high esteem. And then Baba Baruti, for the work that he's done, these are people that I hold in high esteem. And so there's a protectiveness that comes with that for me. I don't play about the elders that I know are valuable to us. So when you come in, you can disagree. I don't have a problem with that at all, sis. Not at all. No one is saying you have to come over here and agree with everything. And the truth be told, I could just skip your comment, to be honest. But I want to engage you guys. But when you start making accusations and projections and saying this is the type of people we are on this panel, then it has to be addressed, because this isn't the first time that you've done it. So it's not about you agreeing with me. You're free to come here at any time and have a conversation without accusations and projections, with respect. That's it. It's very simple for me. It's very, very simple, right? This is ABC 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that I address that. It's no harsh feelings, no love lost. It's just a thing called respect. That's all. But I want to make sure that I acknowledge everyone in the comment. Crypto Vault, I appreciate you. Action. The next time Baba comes back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the ADOS thing. I have the feeling that he don't necessarily want to even have that discussion. But I appreciate your commentary in the in the chat, sir, very much. So, James, I see you. I wanted to make sure I shouted you out. Peace to you, brother, for passing through. I just want to make sure that I see everyone and maybe acknowledge everyone, anyone that I missed. Namdi, hey Namdi, he says some people in this chat are historical or ahistorical people. Nandi, peace to you. Thanks for passing through and showing some love and support. I appreciate all of us being here and trying to have this conversation. I see Herb. He's saying, "Well said, Hanifa." I appreciate you, Herb. No problem. Obafemi. African people link up. Let Americans be that. Let me see who else we have. You said from your own mouth that blacks were not responsible. Sis, bless your heart. Bless your heart, sis. That's what they say in the church, right? Bless your heart, sis. James said she don't know her. Okay, I'm not. She don't know her own race. Humble yourself, then don't come talking like you know. So you guys are going back and forth in the chat. Ashan said, yes, I disagree on the fundamental level of the nature of our opposition. Yeah. And Ashan, you and I don't agree on things that as it mainly pertains to race, I would say in general, and that's fine. There is no love lost. There's still respect. When you come in this space, you come in here and you do not make projections. When I come in your space, I do not do that. I'm very touchy about respect and elders. I am. And if you guys can't tell, I don't know what to tell y'all. I'm just really touchy. And Joanna continues to do this, and I feel like I had to address it tonight because we all have our limits, and if you're going to continue to show up in these particular conversations, not other conversations, by the way, but specifically conversations about race, right? To make projections and so forth, then yes, I am going to address it at some point in the most respectful way. Okay. Namdi said, James, it's funny, man. It's funny, man. I just sit back and watch just people talk sometimes, and historians don't lie, man. Let me see. Herb says, Abibi Fahodi to you as well. Joanna says, okay, peace to y'all, peace to you as well, Joanna. Crypto says, I love you so much, sister. I appreciate you guys. Ashan said, but fighting here ain't gonna change anything outside. It's not, Ashan. There's just certain conversations that I'm over. Yeah. For me, I'm actually more so at the point where it's like, man, look, just get the minds of these children, because most of us we're just, it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm being honest when I say that. And I love my people. Peace says, she says, I'm late, sis. It's all right. We're closing out, but thanks for passing through, sis, and showing some love. Jane says, Namdi, I be trying. Who is this? Iapo says, thank you for your content, Sister Hanifa. I appreciate you, Iapo, and I look forward to having the conversation about Black love with you really, really soon. I'm super excited about that. And then the last comment is Namdi says, James, they are lost people for real, man. They want to be everything else but African, so they wanted to call themselves American to identify with the enemy. That's crazy. And James says, we are in a struggle for our people's mind. Menticide is rampant, as we can see. Guys, make sure that you guys tune in on Friday. Friday is about Black love, and we're going to be focusing on the effects of social media on our relationships, our intimate relationships. And I think, I'm going to have Sir Hale on from Sir Hale Speaks. So we're going to delve into that conversation. So, feel free to come by. It is not a racially focused conversation per se. We're not talking about we're not talking about white folks in that one, but still feel free to come through and have the conversation. We're talking about us in these Black love conversations. So I think that's going to be a pretty fruitful conversation. And then on Monday, we're going to talk about can anything good come from the hood? And we're going to be talking about confronting the violence in our communities, in Black communities. So make sure that you guys show up for those conversations. I appreciate everyone that stayed tuned and supported and had the conversations with us. And until next time, I am going to say Peace and blessings to you. All right, guys. Love y'all. See y'all next time. Peace. Oops.